The Film Verdict gives you Noir 360, hosted by Rashid Bahati, a global podcast that explores the impact and influence of Black cinema around the world.
Welcome, everyone, to Noir 360. I'm your host, Rashid Bahati, and today I'm very excited to have a wonderful friend, I would call, and associate that works in the film business and doing all kinds of great stuff, Patrick Coleman. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's so nice that we finally get a chance to hook up and talk on Noir 360. Yeah. And as I was expressing, this platform is designed to bring people like yourself and talk about this world of Black cinema, culture, art, all folded into one. And here we are today. And let me give a little quick background, Patrick, about yourself here. It says, you know, you were born and raised in the peninsula of Hampton, Virginia, and you received your bachelor's degree in mass communications at Morris Brown in Atlanta. And since you graduated, you migrated to Los Angeles to pursue your passion of television and film, producing and directing. And it says, hey, man, you have worked, in various studios from Walt Disney Company, HBO, CBS, to name a few, in addition to a current role as co-producer on the Paramount Plus streaming series, The Game. And you also have done commercial, critically acclaimed shows such as NCIS, The Shield, and Judging Amy, and more. So, again, welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Very nice introduction, by the way.
I appreciate that. Well, listen, man, let's get into it a little bit, and then we could evolve into maybe talk about some things that we've experienced together.
Right.
But just to give our audience a view, your upbringing in Hampton, Virginia, which I'm very familiar with because there's a real famous HBCU in that vicinity called Hampton University. So tell us a little about that background growing up, your background growing up in Hampton, Virginia.
It was Hampton Institute growing up.
Yeah.
They became Hampton University in, I want to say like in the 80s. Both my parents got their degrees from Hampton. And interesting thing, and respect to them, because my parents, when they did get their college degrees, they had 4 kids from, I think, 18 to probably 10 years old. So they were going to college, they were working full time, and they were raising the 4 of us. So, my mother worked retail at Sears and Roebuck, and my dad, he worked as a cop. So it was it wasn't a lot of money to go around, but, it was a stable household. So we did get that. Both of them were in the house, and both of them worked their tails off to make sure that, we may have went ragged every now and then, but we never went hungry. So
what do you have? Where do you fit in the 4? Are you the oldest, youngest, in between, youngest, whatever?
Yeah, my mother used to refer to me as number 3. So
okay,
I have
you're number
2
3.
older brothers and a younger sister.
How about that?
So she also always used to refer to me as number 3. So
cool.
Yeah, but it was a good I think upbringing, because when you grow up in a small southern town, seaside town, it has its advantages and disadvantages. It has all of the stuff that you would expect in a small town, but we grew up in a subsection which was sort of closer to the harbor, and it was poor whites, poor blacks, working class whites, working class blacks, all sort of in the same neighborhood, all working together. So we kind of figured that out early on. I think in the section where we lived, it was probably a little more integrated than some of the other sections of the city, but we learned how to get along. We learned how to compromise. Learn how to work with people you don't like. You learn how to those are important skills, I think, to have when you're going forward in life. So that was a lot of the stuff that I picked up growing up there.
Well, one thing that I noticed, I was there maybe 2 years ago, at Hampton at the university. And I just think it's such a beautiful environment. It's just amazing to me. I'm saying, man, this is nice to go to school in an environment like this.
Yeah, I agree. You take it for granted growing up when you grow up there. But when you get away and you come back and you start seeing, oh, we got water here, we got easy breezes there, the flow, we got great universities, people were pretty cool as well. It was just something that you took for granted when you were there. But once you moved away and came back, it was much more appreciated.
Well, how happened that you actually did not go to Hampton University? How did you wind up going to Atlanta to Morris Brown, which is another very historic black college and university?
Absolutely. I wanted to get out of Hampton. Okay. It's a small town.
Right.
It's a small town. And I wanted to see what life was like in another place. So I applied to Howard, where my brother went. And then I also applied to A&T, where my oldest brother went to Howard. I applied there. Then my brother, who's 3 years older than me, he went to A&T. I applied there as well. And my godfather was an alum of Morris Brown. So he was a pretty big deal and an inspiration to me. He retired from the Air Force as a lieutenant general, a 3-star general. So that was a huge influence to me in terms of inspiration. And I knew that he graduated from Morris Brown. So I was like, well, Atlanta's a cool city. It's a big city. We got the Atlanta University Center down there, which was Spelman, Morehouse, Clark, and Morris Brown. And there was reciprocity between all of the schools where you could go to classes depending on your major at the different campuses.
Now, I just learned recently there's one other school that gets left out of that AU Center, and that's
ITC.
Yes, there you go. See, there you go. Because I hadn't heard that until about a week ago, and I said nobody's never mentioned that school, the seminary school.
Theological. I can tell you the thing I can tell you about ITC. It's a seminary school, but man, those cats can party. Let me tell you.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah. That's a good one. Well, listen. What drove that interest once you got into Morris Brown to look at mass communications, which it says there?
I started off as a PR major. That was my concentration, public relations. And I remember going into the class. I took a news writing class, which I loved. And I kind of got that. And then I took my first PR class. And the PR class was by the director of the department, a lady, her name was Dr. Graham. I think it was Dr. Graham. But anyway, she was the head of the PR department. Took my first class, and it was so vague, and I didn't get it, and I was really frustrated. And so after the class, I went to her, and I was like, I think I'm missing something. I don't quite understand what PR is. It's not what I thought it was. What is PR? What is public relations? And her response to me, well, what is it to you, Patrick? And I was like, oh, my goodness, I'm going to flunk out of school. That's all I can think. I'm going to flunk out of school because I have no clue. So I was walking around. I went down. Came out of the library. I went down by the bookstore, which I think was like on James P. Brawley. For people who went to AU Center, they know where that is. Used to be a bookstore down on the corner of James P. Brawley. And I ran into a friend, a guy who was from my hometown, and I started asking him, what his major was, what was his concentration, so on and so forth. So he told me radio, television, and film. I was like, well, how do I get into that? I want to switch my major. And he was like, oh, go see your counselor. And he kind of, helped me through it. And again, I'm 18 years old. I'm a freshman. And so I did that. I changed over to mass comm, and I ended up loving it. I loved it, loved it, loved it. Now, granted, at that time, what we were dealing with mostly was news. It was like all news and talk shows and stuff like that. This was sort of in the early days of Oprah Winfrey, Phil Donahue, and stuff like that. So those were the type of shows that we were focusing on, as well as just the news. Monica Kaufman was a big deal back then. So that's what we talked about. And then I took a class with Dr. Eichelberger. And he started talking about film. One of his big students was Spike Lee, who had gone to Morehouse, who was an alumni of Morehouse College. So, so then I started hanging with the film kids, the film nerds. And I was like, oh, I kind of like this stuff. This is cool. So from there, I ended up moving out here after a friend of mine got an intern on A Different World. Ended up moving out here probably a year later. Nowhere to go, didn't know where I was going to live, and just started beating the pavement, calling, trying to get a job as a PA, as a runner, anything like that. And, it just kind of worked out from there.
Because you had the degree, you just came out. And did your parents support you at that time? So, hey, this is a good move?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
That's funny.
and I'll tell you, there was a lot of trepidation on their part because I was 22, maybe 23. I can't remember. I was moving out here. I didn't have a job. I wasn't sure where I was going to live. So their worry and trepidation was about their 22-year-old figuring it out in Los Angeles, And so that was a lot of going back and forth. So they basically, my mother's deal was put together a plan. How is this going to work? You need to figure out where you're going to stay, at least, so on and so forth. So I started putting that into work, and I ended up reaching out to my cousin who lived down in Long Beach. I started reaching out to him, and he told me I could stay with him. My dad was always against it. I ended up working on like this little campaign. It was like it was a political campaign. I can't tell you who the guy was, what his positions were, what he stood for. I just needed to make some money to get to LA, to drive to LA. So I packed up my stuff in a suitcase. I had one hanging bag with one suit in it and like $350 in my pocket. And I just hit the road. My parents did, I have to say, they did give me their credit card to buy gas so I could get gas so that I wouldn't get stranded along the way somewhere.
Right.
So, yeah, and so I just came out here and I just started beating the pavement, started calling and checking around and asking questions, trying to get to anybody that I could to get a foot in the door. And when you're young, you're much more brazen, because you don't know. So you walk up to anybody and say, "Hey, what do you do? Can you give me a shot?" Right.
So did you wind up actually staying with your friend in Long Beach and then doing work in Hollywood? That's a kind of jump.
I did. I was living with my cousin in Long Beach. So what I didn't know that people who live in LA know very well is that LA is not a great public transit city, number one.
Exactly.
Number two, it's very spread out.
Exactly.
So I was catching the bus from Long Beach to set
in Hollywood.
PA.
In Hollywood.
It was LAX. They were shooting in Glendale sometimes. They were shooting all over. And so
that's a long bus ride, man. That's a long bus ride. There was no trains at that time.
No,
it was a long bus ride.
Granted, the Blue Line stopped at Compton.
Right.
The Blue Line went from downtown to stopped at Compton, and I think that was the only train. The Blue Line from downtown to Compton.
That was the first train.
So I had to get up at 3:30 so that I could get to the bus station. The first bus was at 4. I think it was like 4:20. I would catch that on Long Beach Boulevard. That bus would take me to Compton, to the train station. I would take the train to downtown. I would get off at the downtown station and catch the bus to get out to Glendale. I would get there. So call time would be at 7 a.m. I would get there at like 7:10 because that's when the bus dropped me off. And the AD used to yell at me every day that I was late. But I never told him that I was catching the bus because I thought that. Here's a funny thing to show you how it works. It's like if he knows that I'm catching the bus, he's going to get pissed and he's going to fire me. But they weren't paying me, so
it was an internship.
That's what they call it. Yeah, it was more like
non-paid internship back in the day.
Non-paid internship, yeah, which you can't do anymore. Right. So I remember I got to a point where we were going to be. Excuse me. We were going to be at this one location for like 5 days. And I remember going to the security guard and saying, "Hey, I'm just going to bring my clothes tomorrow and just sleep here on set. Can I do that? Would that be cool with you?" And he was like, "Yeah." So we talked to another one of the people who worked there. And I literally would, after we wrapped, I would hang out, talk to the security guard to around, 9, 10 o'clock. Then I would go into the house that we were shooting, the location we were shooting on. I would sleep on the couch. The security guard would come and wake me up at like 6:30, and then I would get dressed, take a shower, and then get out there. And I would, everyone else showed up. I'd go to work. So I did that for 4 days. So
wow. Wow,
yeah.
that's amazing, man. So, it's what I find so fascinating when I hear stories like that, how you evolved and made that transition to Los Angeles from Atlanta, and here you are today. It's a fascinating journey, how one transitions from point A to point B, as you evolve as a person and as your career evolved. Give us a little bit more background about this career. How did you transition from working on set as a intern to actually getting your foot in the door a little bit?
Yeah, so it's never a straight line.
Right.
Your career, we think it's, again, being young and dumb, you think it's going to be, you do A, you're going to get B.
Very linear. It's not linear at all.
It's not linear. It's a lot of lateral stuff.
Right.
So I think my first job in television, I was a PA. One of my friends from college, her sister worked on the show Rock with Charles Dutton, Rocky Carroll, Ella Joyce. She said, we're looking for a PA, you should come interview. So I went and interviewed for that. I didn't get the job at first, but somehow or another, somebody fell out and they called me back. I was happy to be there. So I started working there. And here's the thing about the free labor jobs, the intern jobs and stuff like that. It's a lot of wax on, wax off, if you get that reference, like Karate Kid, painting the fence, and you're thinking you're doing this stuff for naught, but you realize you're developing some really good skills. So when you're working these jobs, you think, oh, I got a college degree and here I am making scripts and getting coffee and buying bagels. What you don't realize you're doing is you're developing work relationship, and people are also getting an idea of your work ethic. How do you do the small jobs? If you can't do the small jobs with integrity and very well, who the hell is going to trust you to do a big job? So, throwing back to growing up in a small working class town, having a job is a big part of esteem for a man, young boys, period. So, I always went, and then I'm a little competitive because I had two other brothers. So I always wanted to be an impact player. So you always want to do a good job. You always want to make it work. You always want to get stuff done, And so I used to do all of that stuff and develop my relationships, and people didn't have issues when it came to me going to another job and calling for recommendations. Some of these same people that I worked for on Rock, I ended up working for later on in my career. Mm-hmm. So just to give you an example, Lisa Helfrich Jackson, who was the production coordinator, she ended up being the producer on the show Everybody Loves Raymond. I also developed a relationship with Vic Kaplan, who ended up being the executive producer on The Ellen Show, and Stan Lathan, who ended up hiring me on Rock in '99. Not Rock, I'm sorry. The Steve Harvey Show in 1999.
Yeah. Stan, I was just going to point out, Stan was a very prolific producer of a lot of television, famous television shows, back in the day. Yeah. And his daughter.
I give you a funny story because when I was working on Rock, Stan was, and again, it's like not understanding what it was. So Stan would always I was always the one he would have go get his lunch. And he was a vegan at the time, so, he didn't eat with everyone else. We would have to go. And so it didn't matter where I was. They would say, call me back here. Stan, hey, man, where are you, man? I need you to get back here. I need you to get my lunch, And so I was like, my goodness, what's going on? Am I doing something wrong? So I used to always rush back. And he started making the word out. He started putting the word out that, to me, that I always want you around here when it's lunchtime because I want you to get my lunch. I thought that he was, upset with me, that he had issues with me, or that he was trying to punish me. And then his assistant, who's to this day is still one of my longest and closest friends out here in LA, she said to me, "No, fool, he trusts you. That's why he keeps calling you to come do his stuff."
That's a cool thing, man.
It was. And then once he said that, it opened it up. I was like, oh.
Yeah. Now, what I find really intriguing as we further this dialogue around your evolution in the business, do you see young people today that have that same energy around that sacrifice, that commitment that you had, just using you as an example, coming out of Long Beach on a public transportation, attempting to get to the other side of town or to the valley or to Hollywood. That's a pretty tedious concept, you know, and the commitment behind that. Do you see young people that you encounter now that you're on the producing end of things with that same level of commitment today?
It's not often. I do see it sometimes. It's rare. It's rare. And I don't know if it's me, if it was just me and my way of trying to get stuff done, or if it is a, you know, just the way that things are now. So it's a little different. And I say that because, you know, when young cats come out here, you know, because listen, to all my friends growing up, whenever they say, hey, my daughter is interested in entertainment, my son is interested in entertainment, they want to get into blah, 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 no problem. You know, give them my number, we can call. Now, it's on them to call. You know, I got shit to do, you know. But I don't mind, you know, no, because this is a friend, you know what I'm saying? You got stuff to do. It's like, you know, and I don't mind talking to them, and I chop it up with them whenever they call. They, you know, I tell them the truth, and I give them the best advice that I can, you know. And I always tell them that, listen, LA is not an easy city, you know. This place isn't for everybody, you know, and it's not going to be a short-term thing. You got to be here for the long haul. If you're not going to be here for the long haul, don't waste your time, you know. And there are a lot of people who come out here because they think what they're thinking is that, well, that's for you. I'm special, you know. And you know how I know I'm special? My grandmother, my mom, my dad, they all told me I was special. I got good grades in school. I'm special, you know. I figured about 2 years, this, you know, I'm gonna have this thing on lock. Nah, it ain't gonna work like that. Unless you have, you know, family members and friends in very high places, you're gonna grind for at least 5 years. I can tell you this. I remember. Dr. Lovett, he was Coach Lovett at the time. He was at Hampton University. He was a friend, good friend, and you know, good advisor. You know, you talk to him. I remember him saying to me one time, it was right before I moved out here, and I was telling him that I was moving out, and he was like, yeah, you know, good luck. And he said, just keep in mind that you spend your first 10 years paying your dues. And I was like, 10 years? That's a long time.
Yeah, this is great. Talking to Patrick Coleman, interesting journey of your film and television career. I think is very beneficial. Some of the things that you're sharing with us to young people and just people in general about what it takes to make it in this industry. You were giving us a story before we broke there about your coach at Hampton.
Oh yeah, Dr. Lovett. He was the athletic director at Hampton University. He was also a coach. He's in the I think it's the CIAA Hall of Fame or whatever. Everybody knows him who played there, any sport there back in the 80s. But yeah, when I was telling him that I was coming out here, what my plans were, we were just sitting around, you know, talking a little bit, and he said to me, "You spend 10 years, your first 10 years of your career, you spend that's going to be paying your dues. You're going to spend 10 years, your first 10 years of your career, you're going to spend paying your dues." And that was probably the truest and best advice that I had ever received in terms of something like that, because you don't realize it. You're basically trying to get traction. You're trying to get, you know, establish your name, establish, you know, yourself as a good worker, as a reliable person. And having that understanding, I was able to recognize when things weren't quite going my way or when I was having a hard time, is that, okay, this is part of that process of developing to who you are. So over time, I ended up starting to get more and more traction. I started to meet more people, and I started to get more work regularly. What happens is when the young kids come out now, I try to give them that same advice. When I talk to them, I try to give them that same advice. And when they don't hit right away, it's something wrong with Hollywood. It's something wrong with the industry. Right. You know, it's always those people out there, they don't know what they're doing. That's why they're producing all of that garbage, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, nah, that's That's just the way it is. You know, if you went to work for KPMG or Deloitte and Touche or any of these big law firms or accounting firms, it's going to be the same thing. They're going to have you doing grunt work for a long, long time, unless you have a family member or a friend, someone who takes to you early and helps you to move up the ladder. But that's like winning the lottery.
Yeah, yeah. Now, on that note, it's just interesting because, we talk about, diversity, inclusion, that kind of thing, a lot about Hollywood. And it becomes a very political term, actually, in that regard. Yeah, I was just going to...
So...
Yeah, go ahead.
When you talk about diversity and you talk about, how it has become political, the way I look at it is that if the people who complain about diversity and the people who complain about it being political, all the people who are marginal at best, I think, people who are just been getting by because there was no competition. So when they start opening it up to competition, they start getting their feelings hurt because they start going, well, that's not fair, and you're taking jobs from us, and these are our jobs. Well, number one, I don't know why it was yours in the first place. Number two, the people who are really good, you don't see them fretting. Mm-hmm. You don't see them worrying because they're thinking to themselves, like anybody who's about competition is like, okay, if you think you can do what I do, come on, It's always, I feel like it's the people who are kind of, on that bottom rung who've just been getting by, they're the ones who have the most issue with it.
Okay, well, but you've been around the industry for a while now. Mm-hmm. Are you saying then that, from your perspective, there's no inequities that are happening within the business itself as a structure, the nepotism, the lack of diversity? It has nothing to do with maybe a person's abilities? Are you saying that?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are you implying that because of what you've seen in terms of people that make those the most inquiries about diversity and so forth and so on, these are not necessarily these people would be getting these shots, but they're not capable to handle the shot?
I'll say it like this. Usually by the time a woman or a person of color gets a shot, they were probably ready 3 years earlier, 5 years earlier. They were probably ready a long time ago. I'll say it that way. So, because you're always trying to figure out, you're always trying to work hard. You just looking for the opportunity. And once you get your opportunity and get in the door, you just run with it. On the studio side, every studio that I've worked at, every studio that I've been affiliated with, they have never had problems with putting me up for any show that was available. CBS, NBC, Disney, ABC, none of those places ever have a problem with putting me up for the jobs because they know my resume, they know my work reputation, and they know what I'm capable of. It's going to the interviews with the producers on the shows. Mm-hmm. So I could do 3 interviews, 4 interviews, and get 1. Now, does that have anything to do with me personally or, my race or anything like that? I don't know, but I know that, there are people who end up getting jobs on shows that have had less experience than me. Mm-hmm. So I can say it that way.
So you contribute that to what, though? At the end of the day, bias or what do you contribute it to?
Well, I can't. I can only thing I can say is that because I can't really say what's going on in a person's head. Yeah, I can only say that maybe they were more comfortable with someone else that they interviewed. Mm-hmm. And again, the studios have always been very good at championing. Say, hey, this is a guy who's great. Even Sony, all of them. This is a guy, this person's pretty good. We like their resume. Because they'll send you, we can approve this person, blah, 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 blah. And then you get to the interview with the actual people and, there could be stuff. There could be, I don't know. I'll just say, I don't know, because I can't put myself in someone else's head. The people who've hired me have appreciated me. Mm-hmm. and I appreciated them greatly, and I'm grateful to them, and I love them all. So
got it.
Yeah.
Well, as we evolve the conversation now to just talking about when I met you a few years ago, I think I was doing some curation at a film festival, got a chance to meet you. I've forgotten exactly how I met you. I think we met through Tony from Burkina Faso.
Oh, right. Tony Mara.
Yeah, I think we did. Yeah. But I'm not absolutely sure. Don't hold me to that one. But I know he was very enthusiastic about you. And he was saying, hey, my friend has this new film. It's a short or it's a feature. It wasn't a short.
That's right.
Yeah, it was a feature film.
Yeah.
And Patterns, right?
Patterns of Passion. That's right.
Patterns of Passion. And right. I just remember he said, hey, you got to talk to him. You got to see how you can get him on this film festival, whatever. So that's how we met. Yeah,
it was. Yeah. It was. And I was about as green as can be coming into that, because and the way that happened was I had this little script that I had written, and I wanted to make it into a feature film. And I was talking to this lady named Jane Swearigan. She worked at a post-production facility, and she was like, well, let me know and we'll help you out. And so that was like, uh-oh. She basically put me on the spot. Now I have to deliver. Yeah. So I went into like, okay, active mode. How do I do this? What do I do? And I started calling her. And back then, video, people weren't shooting on video. So I was shooting on actual film. And so,
was it 16?
Super 16 millimeter film, yeah.
Okay.
So I had to go to figure out how to get films, and I started talking to people, and I started talking to it was this DP, this guy named Kenneth Zunder. He was the one that told me about short ends. He said, you can go and you can get short ends. He said, because when we finish shooting this film, if there's, 100 feet, 120 feet left, we'll just send it back to the lab or they'll sell it back. He said, we can give you these if you want. And I was like, well, I can't afford the 35 millimeter camera. He said, well, there are places around town that sell short ends for Super 16. So I started researching them and finding them, and I started buying up all these little short ends of film and stuff like that. And that's how I was able to put it together.
That's pretty cool.
Again, I went and found a guy at, I think he was a student at AFI. I looked at everyone's reels, and I liked his stuff a lot. He was a really good photographer. That's how I found a photographer, and then I started looking for actors. I put out ads into, I think it was Backstage West.
Right.
I don't even know if that was it, right?
Yeah, that was back in the day, Backstage West. That's true.
Right. So I put an ad in Backstage West, and then I got a PO box, and then everyone sent all of their headshots and resumes, and I did interviews, and I did auditions. And
so where did you get your budget? Was it from you working on these shows in Hollywood that allowed you to come up with these budgets to do your film?
Part of it was I reached out to friends and family and got enough money. The way I looked at it was I need to get enough money to finish photography. That's all I wanted to do. And then I was like, the post-production stuff, I can deal with that later. Right now, because I saw it in stages. Finish photography, then deal with post-production. Finish post-production, then deal with the next bit. All right. You still here, Rashid?
I'm here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I was like, finish photography, then deal with post-production. Finish post-production, then deal with the film festival circuit. And so I literally went after it that way. So I called my brothers, my cousins, my friends, everyone, and said, hey, I'm trying to do this. Can you help me out? I actually ran out of money. We shot for 13 days. I ran out of money probably 11 days in. And I called my father up in a panic. And I was like, I need some help. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm 2/3 of the way through this, and I'm about to crash and burn. And he said, all right. No, actually, he said to me, it's so funny. He said, well, I don't know, man. I can't help you. I said, well, if I don't finish this, I'm going to have to move back home with you. And he wrote me a check. Yeah, he wrote me a check. He wrote me a check. So that's how I ended up finishing it.
I think you mentioned that story to me when I first met you about your father stepping in at a certain point, but that was the key to it. I'll be moving back if you don't help.
Now, I think I introduced you to him in Nashville. Nashville.
Okay, your dad came to Nashville.
Yeah, he came up from Virginia to Nashville for that festival. Yeah.
For some reason, I don't really recall that part, but I remember that story.
Yeah. I was like, man,
that's
I'm gonna have
so
to move
cool.
back. He was like, I'm sure in his head was like, you can't move back here.
Now,
whatever it takes.
from what I call from passion to profit. How did doing that feature and the sacrifices that you made to do that feature, how did that springboard you to the next level of your career?
Well, it gave me, it's a slow grind. It's a slow burn. And again, so when I got into the marketing stage, that's where I had issue understanding how it all worked. I didn't know how to market myself. I didn't know how to, I wasn't as brazen as I was, 8 years earlier, 10 years earlier. And so I just thought that, here's the thing that I thought. I thought it was, getting to film festivals was sort of a democratic process. Back then, it was not, and I'm sure it's still not for a lot of festivals.
It's not.
It wasn't a democratic process, and it was, it was just crazy because I had a friend who told me that the way he got into a few festivals was that he knew people who worked for the festivals directly. And I was like, well, shit, I don't know anybody. So I started going, I went to Babu's festival and
Pan-African Film Festival.
I went to the Pan-African Film Festival and I was just there with a stack of DVDs, just handing them out to anyone who would look at them. And then, I think her name was Diara Ndexpa from New York. She got it. She saw it. She liked it. She helped me get into FESPACO. At FESPACO, she saw all the people there saw it. Babu saw it, and Babu put me back in. He brought me back to be in the Pan African Film Festival. Mm-hmm. I think I may have met you around that time. You saw it, and you were like, "Well, you need to think about these festivals, this festival, this festival. Send it to those places." And so it started to help me get into sort of a groove of how it all works.
Right.
Being able to market yourself, being able to talk to people, being able to figure out who knows what, where, why, and how, and that was the big help. So it didn't do what I wanted it to do. But it did what I didn't expect it to do, which was gave me a better understanding of filmmaking, producing from head to toe. So at the end of the day, I still made a film.
Right.
And it's something that I'm happy about. And I gained a whole lot of knowledge that I carried into the next film, the next job, the next film, the next job, the next film, the next job. Because if you think about it like this, you can read all the books you want to read about swimming. You're not going to learn how to swim until you get wet.
Right.
Until you get in the water. And so that's the way I look at film.
Great analogy. Right. So in the last few minutes we have now for this particular interview and conversation, what are you doing now? What's on Patrick Coleman's plate right now? What are you up to?
Well, I am just calling and trying to keep my name out there to people. There is a pending strike that's going to be decided in a few days. What's the date? 27th. I think May 1st they're going to decide. So everything is pretty much on hold at the moment.
And this strike is writers? What's the strike? Give a little background about this strike. Yeah. What's going on?
It's the Writers Guild of America. They are their contract is up, so they're up for negotiations, and they're trying to, as you always do when you're collective bargaining, is get a good wage for yourself and your team.
Okay, yeah, we're here talking to Patrick Coleman, and we're just kind of winding down now our interview. But what is Patrick up to these days? What is Patrick Coleman doing?
Well, I'm still trying to get myself out there. I'm still trying to keep myself available. I don't care who you are in this town. You're always auditioning. You're always trying to get your next job. I mean, from the biggest stars to the smallest, person who sweeps the floors. We're all trying to get our next jobs, unless you're like Denzel Washington or somebody like that, those cats, but they did that for a long time. So they've earned the privilege to be where they are. But there is a pending writer's strike for the Writers Guild of America. Their contracts are up. So there is not much work happening at the moment.
It's interesting.
Yeah, that's a little frustrating for a lot of us, but I understand the game. It's about leverage and negotiations. So those negotiations are supposed to begin on May 1st. Hopefully they will come to a resolution and we'll get back to work. But, in the meantime, it's just, maintaining relationships, letting people know I'm available, keeping my name out there. A lot of coffees, a lot of, golfing, and a lot of doing stuff like this.
Networking.
Just keeping yourself out there. So, and that's hugely important, because here's the other thing too. Especially when we're, just to kind of jump back, when we were talking about, young kids and coming out here, stuff like that. LA, and probably like every industry, is very much relationship based. So this is a relationship industry, and people are, if you don't develop relationships, you will be forgotten. So that's just something that needs to be taken as you jump into this.
Well, with that said, as it relates to your first venture, your first feature film some years ago, are you still in that mode of operation right now? Are you developing any films?
Yeah. So I just I had 2 short films that I just did again, trying to keep that stuff onto the circuit. Did I lose you again?
Yeah, I don't know what's happening, why we keep getting a drop. But we're going to finish it out when we come back, because I don't know what's going on with that. Okay.
Sorry, here we go. I'm back.
Okay.
So I have a lot of stuff that I'm working with. I'm working with the writer. We have 2 screenplays and a stage play. I have a TV series that I've put together and written. I've even sketched out all the seasons for that, all 5 seasons of it. And, and I just did a couple of short films that just came off the circuit recently. So I'm staying busy. I'm keeping my chops up, as well as doing all the other stuff. I'm keeping my chops up because it is a creative stuff that I really like. It is a storytelling that I love. And filmmaking is filmmaking. You either want to do it or you don't. It's a grind. So,
well, one question I do want to ask that I didn't really get total clarification, but I know you're a storyteller and that kind of thing, but what is your real passion around the industry? Is it writing, the creative side of writing, or is it the actual cinematography side of it? And because I think when I met you, you were editor. I remember you talking about you edited.
Yeah. Well, because I had to cut that film. That was one of my by necessity.
By necessity, you learned how to edit.
Yeah.
I feel you.
So my passion is directing and producing.
Okay.
That's what, just putting all of that stuff together.
Putting it together.
Because it's about putting together a team. It's about building. And I grew up playing team sports.
Okay.
So I understand the value in, team and vision and working together for a common goal. That's the stuff that really gets me going and really drives me. Even when I'm working on different television shows, it's about, okay, I'm working with all of these really cool people who are really great. Let's do this. This is going to be fun. And I always tell people, I don't quite understand how you can be angry in this industry, because you are here by choice. And it's too much stuff going on to make other people miserable. It's like, figure it out, or just go away and let someone else be here who wants to be here.
Exactly. Well, the success that you've had with The Game as a co-producer, I think it's incredible. That's a very popular show. Are you into another season with that, or what's going on your television side right now? I think we locked up again. Not sure what's going on with that part of it. Okay, so I think what we'll do, Patrick, I'm not sure why we keep dropping, but I think what we'll do maybe just kind of close it out for now, and we get another opportunity, we can come back and do another one, at another time.
I'll be happy to.
Yeah, because it's pretty cool format. People, I think the knowledge that you're sharing is so important. Even for people that are in the business,
right.
and for up and coming people, for sure, they need to hear that chronological approach to how you got where you are. It's not
it's
magical.
A traversing effect.
It's not magical.
That's right. You can see that up there, but you might not get. It's funny. Quick story is like my mother used to always tell me when I used to, come to her and I was feeling down about stuff being wrong. And this was as a little kid. She would always say, son, life ain't no crystal stair. She would always tell me about that poem. Life ain't no crystal stair. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's going to have corners that are dark, places where the boards are coming up, And she said, go read that play. Go read that poem. Go read that poem. So, and that's the same thing I'll say about this industry is that it's not a crystal stair.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing your journey to this point, and I'm sure you're going a lot further. We're excited about that, and it's always been a pleasure to know you. You're a very professional brother, and I just own it and making things happen. So thanks for coming on Noir 360, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, and all the best to you and your team. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.
The Film Verdict gives you Noir 360, hosted by Rashid Bahati, a global podcast that explores the impact and influence of Black cinema around the world.